Okay, today is November 11th, 2011. My name is Mary Larson, and we're here at the Edmund Lowe Library with Jeremy Brown, who has been working as part of his duties as the manager of Willham House. Is that your proper title?
Event planner for
Event
OSU.
planner for
Yes,
OSU?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Before we start out with anything else, can you tell us a little bit about where you were born and raised?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a native of Florida, born and raised on Amelia Island, Florida.
Okay. And where did you go to school when you were growing up? What high school?
Nassau Christian Academy.
Okay.
Yeah, a little private school.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun.
Near Amelia Island there?
Near Amelia Island, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Born and raised and started kindergarten all the way through.
Okay. And what did you do after you left high school?
I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
I actually began working for the Amelia Island Plantation. It's
Okay.
a 4-star, 4-diamond resort on Amelia Island.
Mm-hmm.
And had a summer job, not internship, a job, and then went to school for a year and a half in Gainesville,
Okay.
and came back and worked full-time for the Ritz-Carlton.
Okay.
So, sorry, full-time for Amelia Island Plantation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do after Amelia Island? Did you go on to Ritz-Carlton after that? Or
Yeah,
if you could talk a little bit about just the progression of your career.
Ultimately, we all have a decision we make, you know, or whether school or work is best for us. And I enjoyed college, but I enjoyed more working with people. And while going to school in Gainesville, I got a job as an assistant manager of a suit and sport coat store. And selling clothes is really fun for me, but in any sales position, there's that you got to sell to have a paycheck / commission. And while I enjoyed helping people with suit sales, I learned that I really enjoyed helping people with resorts, you know, because the product is already selling itself because it's quality. Then as customer service, you're just delivering on the quality that's there. And so after working for a year and a half in retail, I went back home and continued working again for the plantation, and then spent about 4 to 4.5 years with them, working the positions of belle, doorman, valet, concierge, and then guest services director over all those positions.
That would have been quite a... I was going to say quite a position because,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a well-known resort.
It is, and they do well. And then the other challenge we had during that time was the plantation is a condo complex association. So the plantation builds the condos, sells the condos, then leases the condos to the owners who buy them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of a property management company. And then throughout that, 1,700 acres are homes that people build. So you're both sustaining residencies and being part of a hotel experience. And then we built a hotel of 240 rooms. So it was kind of a all-everything position. And I learned a lot. It was a good experience.
Mm-hmm. So where did you go after that?
To the Ritz-Carlton.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the world of hotel companies. The plantation's great, but they are a one-owner, one-owned property. And so they've achieved 4-diamond, 4-star status. But being part of the Ritz-Carlton is a not just national brand, international brand. And when I relocated to Palm Springs, California, with my then fiance to be married, I began working for the Ritz-Carlton and Rancho Mirage Ritz-Carlton in Palm Valley, and worked for them for a year and a half, then transferred back to home, which is Florida, for the Ritz-Carlton Amelia Island, and worked there for 10 years.
Okay. And what positions did you have when you were working there?
The Ritz.
Mm-hmm.
Well, working the plantation,
Mm-hmm.
most of my experience was in front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And this may sound humbling or whatever, but I hated calling the 911 page for all the managers. And all the managers would come to your department, let's say check in or check out, or a big bus pulls in, and they stand there not having a clue of what to do because they may be a food and beverage director, but they have no idea how to check a guest in. And so I wanted to be more grounded, and I always had the pursuit of being in hotel management, and I wanted to be the guy that was called that could kind of figure things out and not stand there. So, and that's unusual because most general managers of big hotels come up one chain or the other, either food and beverage or your lodging.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to be both. So I began working food and beverage, and started out in room service, and the kind of basic intro 101 of how to do food and quality. And it's a 24-hour operation, so that was a breakfast, lunch, dinner, or overnight shift sometimes. And worked that for a year and a half. Then transitioned to the cafe, which is a 3-meal restaurant that serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner, no overnight naturally, but they will open the restaurant at 6:30. And one flow of sequence continues into the other until the evening's done at 10 o'clock or later. And I was with them for 2.5 years and transitioned from them to manager of destination services, which were coming into booking hotel talent and live bands and musicians and props and entertainment and tables and chairs and linens and creating elaborate weddings and just being all things to all people as a DMC representative. Taught me a lot. However, pay was not so good. So I went back to food and beverage and then began working in fine dining for the restaurant called The Grill. You may or may not have heard of it, but they're 5 Diamond, 5 Star, at a 5 Diamond, 5 Star restaurant. And they were the only 5 Diamond, 5 Star restaurant to achieve that quality for 11 years, which no other place in Florida can say that. And that's amazing when you consider Miami, Orlando, Dade, South County, and Palm Beach. I mean, it's pretty something. But it was an amenity, if that makes sense to you. So it lost more money than it gained. So we transitioned to Salt, the fine dining restaurant, and made it a 4 Diamond, 4 Star restaurant. Allowed the guests to dress more casual, who were already coming to the beach anyways and may not have packed the jacket and tie, and that's when the restaurant did amazingly well. So that would be my last 4.5 years at the Ritz-Carlton with Spin and Fine Dining.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to give people a sense of how it was that you got to this position and what you were bringing with you.
Yeah, there's a lot that I've been blessed to do in my life so far. For being 37 and having 16 years in hotel resort experience, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. So how did you end up applying for the OSU position?
It's kind of a unique story. Applying from Florida to here, there were a lot of positions available. And this particular position was available of all things through temp services, express employment. Mm-hmm. And I looked for 2.5, 3 months before we arrived. And we moved here, as you know, for church. Mm-hmm. As I'm also an ordained minister. And I'm a licensed sommelier, so I can bless the food or bless the wine and pick out a good one at the same time. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But we moved here for ulterior reasons and kept just absolutely pounding the market, trying to find the right job for my family. And with all you've heard that I've done, there was that you're overqualified for some of these lower positions, or would the hours work with trying to build a church was challenging. And so I hate to say my darkest day, that was the slightly brightest day. I thought, I can't get any worse, I'm going to a temp agency and we'll see what happens. And I met the manager and he said, I have a job at OSU I never thought I could fill. And I said, well, what is that? He said, well, the Hargises need an event planner. And I said, well, who are they? And he said, well, they're the president of Oklahoma State University. And I said, oh, that big college over there? He said, yeah, that big college over there. And I interviewed and met Ms. Hargis, Rick Kryshek, the director of physical plant, and they had a specific need. The house was in a state of disrepair, and it's not that it's not of quality, because OSU is quality, but when you have a 61 structure, that the president doesn't have time to be there half the time because of traveling, and the maintenance people who work the house only work the house when calls are made. You're constantly chasing your tail. So there was a two-pronged position. One is handle the events for the president and his wife and let the guest in and out and be there for the catering and set up and tear down. And then there was help us repair the state of the home.
Mm-hmm. Right, because my understanding is that there's really no one that's assigned to Willham House just on its own. There's no staff that's specific to.
Right.
We
have people who will. It's their area of emphasis, but our electricians will do all the other electrician jobs they're called to do. But we do have someone who's trained and has been in the house and has the right people person skills to be around the president, and we have to run background checks on the people because there are priceless works of art that are in that home on loan from OSU's University Art Department. So you've got to have a mixture of all things to be able to be in the president's house.
Right.
So
what charges were you given? If you could talk a little bit about your, the description of your job, your responsibilities, what charges you were given when you first arrived.
Well, it's an undefined role, to be quite honest with you, ever involving, because you have to walk a fine line. When I actually drove by the house before I took the position. I thought, dear God, it just is not an appealing structure when you look at it. I mean, it's got history to it, which is nice, but it's dated is the best way of saying it. And so the first day I walked the house with Miss Hargis, we've noticed a lot of glaring things. For instance, you have a handicap accessible restroom on the second level. You do not have a handicap accessible walk path, nor did you install, not her, but the people, handicap accessible door handles. So if ever a guest would go all terrain across the grass to get into the lower basement for an event, you've not even made it accessible for them to enter the structure. And some of those, that's a small example of day one. What are you all thinking? How do we get this to a state of quality that wasn't there? And so structure was a big emphasis from Rick Krychek and from Ms. Hargis of help us repair the facility. And then the president's office was handling the catered events, but the person who was there prior to me had stepped away. And it was kind of an overbearing stress load for the ladies who were there. And so with my catering experience, it was easy for me to assimilate and handle the catering aspects. And it was part of my job description from the beginning. But our first big challenge was getting the house into a state that was presentable, if that makes sense. I mean, I know they had been using it that way, but there's a lot of changes we made for the better.
Well, and that's something that maybe we can talk about a little bit, about division between public and private spaces. You know, when you got there, what was public, what was private?
Well, you obviously have the master suite of the Hargises, and that's a space that we enter because we have to clean, you know, obviously her private quarters, but I don't think, unless it's a personal friend of hers, guests go there. And I certainly never intentionally have ever taken anyone through that area. So that's kind of her private space. But really, the heart of what I saw, and you've heard this from being an OSU employee, there's a big push for tearing down the Willham House because it is so dated. It isn't what you expect a president to be in, especially when you compare the facilities of Carson Creek, the OSU football stadium. There's a level of quality being established that isn't there for the president. And they're not complaining about it. They're gracious people, but you have to think long term when we hire the next president, and his home is elaborate, and he's making whatever money he's making before he or she joins us. Would they want to live in this house? And that's a part of the problem with having such a dated structure that we have. And they've expanded to it throughout the years, but there is that mixture of do you demo it or do you build new? And the reason that's there is the basement has its limitations. You can only seat 48 guests for dinner, 48 guests for dinner. And it's hard for me as an event planner to contact a student group and say, you've been chosen to come to the president's house. However, please keep your numbers below 50 because we just can't handle a group of that size. And so we're doing things that were never designed for the structure to happen.
And my understanding from talking to other people is that, well, and talking to Richard Willham, whose parents were there when the house was designed.
Yes, ma'am.
It was a much more private space. It wasn't where all of the events were held at the time that it was designed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Entertaining by the president has grown tremendously from president to president because it is an honor for students or faculty or staff or the community to be invited into the home of the president. It's a personal thing that I don't think was there in the 60s and 70s. Not that they didn't do it at all, but not to the level that it's done today.
Yeah, I think there's much more outreach expected of presidents now than there might have been then. Now, when you first got to the house, and when did, just for the record, when did you actually arrive as an OSU employee?
Well, I don't think a temp is an OSU employee, but it may. I'm not sure how.
Well, when did you start with OSU in whatever capacity?
Well, I think it's February 22nd was the first day I walked into the Willham House.
Okay.
Day one, job one.
And that was 2010.
Yeah,
okay.
And that's through express employment as an express employee, contract personnel. And I could not attain full-time status with OSU until July 1 of 2010 because that's when the new fiscal year began and the budget was there to bring me on full-time. It was a temp role, let's see if this person works or doesn't work and how it works with the Hargises, because it's difficult to have people always in your home. And even though you're doing great things for the house, there has to be a comfort level there that would be awkward if they were in my home, as often was needed to turn the house around.
Okay. Now, when you first arrived, can you talk a little bit about the layout of the rooms, any special features?
Special being attractive or special being negative?
Actually, either way, but I'm thinking things that are a little unusual, maybe like the cabinetry in the hallway, or...
Well, I really wanted the place to look better as a whole. When you're trained to the level that I am as a Ritz-Carlton employee, you do things to the level of a 5-diamond, 5-star resort. It's ingrained in me. I can't pull it out if I wanted to. And so if I walk into even a restroom and I see that the counters have a broken caulk line around the sink or on the backsplash, or the mirror is being cleaned but it's not clean to the corners, or the toilet was white but the seat's still dirty from underneath, those are all things that the Ritz-Carlton has trained us to make sure that the complete look is there. And so I had to instruct or teach our housekeepers to not just clean what you see, but clean what you don't. And if you're not touching an item, then how do you know it's clean? You can't assume it's dust-free unless you picked the item up and wiped it and then wiped under it and thoroughly cleaned. There isn't that level of training in the position until I arrived. And so those are kind of the things that I see when I first got there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the house, to touch on something that we're probably going to get to, the biggest challenge as an event planner for the house is the president's personal kitchen space that they have in the upstairs area. They have a small Dutch oven, and most caterers use hotel pans, which are 48 by 24. You couldn't even fit half a hotel pan in the Dutch oven, and so not only are the caterers naturally cooking 90% of things off property, they're not really able to sustain the level of heat or quality that they want. And then most events are downstairs, so they and the staff are trucking everything downstairs as they serve. And as the Hargises come in to get ready for their event, they're walking through carts and cooks and servers and personnel. And so there was a lot that we were able to accomplish to give the Hargises, or whoever is the president, their own space. That was the biggest challenge.
Okay, so let's talk, for people who haven't been to the Willham House, let's talk a little bit about the layout of the top floor.
Sure.
And the layout of the basement, and why you have those issues. So what rooms, as you walk into the house from the main entrance, how are things laid out on the top floor?
Well, the main entranceway is open. It was a partition wall, as I learned from Mr. Willham's interview with you, that was meant to be a sitting area for the president and a fireplace or their guest. And so that was been made open, and it was done before I arrived. So the natural entranceway is an open area that can entertain 30, 35 guests, I would say. And then as you proceed into their den, small 10 by 12 room, I would say, for watching television, kind of relaxing. And then you have the small kitchen area that is all 61. Even the hood of the president's home is a 61 hood that still works. And it has been modernized slightly, but I think it's the original cabinetry. I don't think that's been modified at all. And then you head into their office or his office, and then you have the garage and laundry areas. And then as you come back to the main heart of the room, the house breaks, I believe it's east-west, and on the east is the Hargises suite. Could be wrong about north, south, east, west. Yeah, sorry.
Well, no, and I'm not sure. I think it would be the west is the Hargises suite, and the east.
Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So maybe it's north-south, because I know it comes up over the front of the...
Okay.
Yeah. Let's say north then. To the north is the guest suites, and to the south is the Hargises suite. And they being physical plant, had renovated their suite, the Hargises suite, I'm told 10 or 12 years ago. And it was an addition, so it's kind of boxy, if it makes sense, almost like a mouse maze, the way it lays out.
And that's to the left, right after you come into the main.
Yes, ma'am.
The main entrance.
And then to the right is the guest suite area, and there's 2 rear bedrooms that one has Miss Hargis's desk in, and the other is open for guests to use.
Okay. Now, are there, what changes, you talked a little bit about some of the previous changes that you knew had been made. In the time that you've been here, what changes do you know of that have been made to buildings and grounds?
I don't know if you have enough tape.
Let's hit the highlights,
sure.
I guess.
Well, and this was before I was even hired, but the ADA accessible walk path was huge. And that decision was made, and I sat in on the meetings of the planning of it and how it was going to be shaped and curved and layered. But it was already approved. I was just happened to be there. And it's huge because now catering companies can come park in the lower parking lot and enter along the walk path into the lower basement, and that gives the Hargises their own space, and it gives them direct access to where most events are held. Mm-hmm. We changed the carpet in the basement. It was absolutely dated and dark and stained and reminded me of a dungeon when we walked into it. So we installed new carpeting into that area and made it look more attractive, not just because it's new carpet, but the way that we laid out the patterns was almost more like a hotel lobby, so that when you're setting up tables or chairs or sitting areas, it's a more attractive flow. We added a beverage bar. There was a storage locker that we had for beverages, and we made that into a drink station with a stainless steel sink and an ice maker and a coffee maker, and added power to a wall. Sounds kind of simple, but had to be 220 so that you could have induction burners available to cook, because Ms. Hargis and the president enjoy an action station instead of just past hors d'oeuvres at an event. We then can offer a pasta station or a chili station or an omelet station for breakfast, or it gives us the ability to do more things in entertainment.
Yeah, and for people who haven't been in Willham House, I mean, having the caterers be able to come in on that lower level is huge, because
really
the
is.
Stairwell is very small.
Mm-hmm.
and not circular, but it has, a landing
Right.
in the middle there, and it's not that wide.
Right, and it's dangerous for servers to carry trays, ascending
Right.
stairs, which all the food would then come down to the event. So it was a safety issue as well as form
and
of
for
function.
guests too, because the guests are trying to go up and down the stairs.
right.
Because if everybody's coming in through the main door, so this way you can bring in guests through the main door or through the lower entrance,
Yeah.
and you're not running into catering at the same time.
Everything that we've done has really made the space function better. We have not added a new wall or bumped out the existing footprint of the home itself, the structure. We have just modified things within the structure to make it more functioning or more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a nutshell. One of the things that drove me crazy is all of the bathrooms were painted the same color, all in off-white yellow, and yet each bathroom had a wainscoting going across the bottom. Wainscoting is usually in a room to break up the eye. Well, what did you install wainscoting for if everything's the same color? So even working with physical plant to change each restroom to its own color scheme or break up the eye in color is a small thing that makes the space look better. And so we've done a lot to make the home look better.
And my understanding from talking to Mrs. Hargis is that a lot of this was done in conjunction with different classes who were able to use the president's home as a lab, essentially.
Yes, ma'am. The first one was a light study program that was there before really any major changes occurred. And I came on, and the light program was finishing in the last month, but it was a full semester that it had happened for. And so I just caught the tail end of that light study program. Mm-hmm. And that, it takes time for those things to work, but we have changed most of the photolescence, or whatever the term is, bulbs, to a better bulb from that light study program that puts out more energy and uses less power. Okay. So those things, you're right, they do help shape the president's house.
Yeah, and it gives students a way to see not only to see the president's house, but to use it as a lab. Although
Yes,
that makes the president and his wife sound a bit like guinea pigs,
No.
which is, but I know Mrs. Hargis had said she wanted things to be interactive.
Yeah.
I mean, that they had both wanted that.
And
so.
to her credit, she goes out once a week and she visits parts of campus. I think it's on Mondays. And she'll go into the engineering lab, and she'll go into science labs. And if she, in the process of meeting the students, staff, and faculty, if they need a space to do something, she's always willing to offer the president's house for that space. She wants the home to have life.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and that's a much more public use of it than what it was getting.
Exactly.
In a lot of its former incarnations, I guess. Are there any future changes? I mean, any modifications that you're looking at of the current house at present?
She has asked, Ms. Hargis has asked us and the housekeeper who cleans the house, hey, if you're designing this space, what would you do? And I think that's great because as a nutshell, there's a gentleman I met that actually renovated, or not even renovated, when they built the stadium. He's the overall chef of everything, and he was able to exactly pick out how he wanted the line set up, where he wanted the dishwashing, how he wanted the coolers, what size, the loading docks. I mean, he was involved in everything. Because he had the vision and they believed in his vision, he can execute the operation to a level that amazes them. And I like that she looks at the staff that way and says, you know, how can we make this work better for both you, the caterers, and the future presidents of Oklahoma State University? And there's been that battle between demoing and building anew. And there's a big thought of retaining the main entrance area where the hardwood floor is, keeping that as the center of the structure and adding on, I think we determined that was north, and making the basement larger and building more guest suites so that when we have the big donors that come in that want to stay with the president, they have a more appointed facility to what level they're used to traveling in. Because right now the guest bathroom is a 61 bathroom with 61 tile, and you know the faucets and features, they're just not to the standards of today's guest travelers. And when you have a guest that can give you a multi-million-dollar check, you really want to impress them with all things that are OSU. Mm-hmm. So I believe they're going to expand the house in the basement. There has been no approval of that. There's no budget meeting about it yet. That's just what the Hargises have said. Mm-hmm. Meeting with the engineers is let's make the entertainment area larger so that we can entertain more guests and not make everyone conform to it's 50 or less.
Right, and that's a very public space, so it's really general OSU space.
It is.
I mean, it's not as if they're, enlarging the master suite or something.
Right. They're trying to make the home more functioning for catering, and also more functioning for bringing in those big donors that make the house or make OSU successful, really.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked a little bit about entertaining issues and space. Are there any other things that you were able to do, either with staffing or layouts, or just little changes in how something was arranged to help facilitate catering and event planning?
Yeah. The previous housekeeper was a fine lady. She was trained by physical plant to do custodial level cleaning. Mm-hmm. And with my resort level training, I had to work to find the right person who was willing to accept those new responsibilities to clean to another level than they had before. And we were able to find Pauline Hall, who had worked at the Atherton Hotel for 32 years. And because she's hotel trained, which is many degrees higher than custodial, she was able to come in, and I was able to train her on how to clean to a level that Ms. Hargis wanted the home to be, because she, quite frankly, does not have time to be there to point out everything that she needs done. Her and President Hargis's traveling schedule is insane, all that they do for OSU and work with the foundation and take trips, and it's amazing how much they're on the road, working for Oklahoma State University. So that was a big change. And then giving her the tools to do the job right, and giving her a training checklist of what to do on a Monday or Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, or Friday. We installed a deep cleaning Wednesday so that you would know throughout a month on that first Wednesday, it's time to go into the master suite and pull the bed from the wall, pull the furniture from the wall, pick up the carpet, or the rug, should I say, shake it out, move everything off, clean that whole area, mop it, sweep it, vacuum it, dust it, you fully detail every area of that suite, and you know once it's been done once a month, then on the next Wednesday it's a living room, on the third Wednesday it's a guest suite, on the fourth it's a living room, the den area. And so when you clean to that level, you don't have dust bunnies sitting around for 6 months or 8 months or even longer. And so it takes time to get the home up to that quality, but she was able to do that for us. So that's an idea of staff. What was the other question?
Oh, just with catering or entertaining, was there anything else you were able to do? You mentioned, smaller things like having the beverage station put in and the electrical outlets. Were there any other things that you were able to arrange or rearrange?
As
Anything
it
like
pertains
that?
to the house?
Right.
We knocked out there was a folding accordion petition that was on both sides of the fireplace. So as you ascend the steps, you have the block so you don't see the back. And when we added the beverage counter area, the stainless steel area I mentioned before, we took that locker storage and put it behind the brick wall. Well, that's also where the tables and chairs at one time were kept. And thankfully, we ordered new tables and chairs because the tables were 60s or 70 models. They honestly were about 125 pounds a piece. And so as you're rolling these heavy oak tables, if it fell over, a lady could not pick it up and put it in the right position. So there was a safety concern. And so we ordered My-Light chairs, and we demoed that accordion door that wasn't needed in the first place because you had one that was blocking the space. And we added a set of western doors so that servers can kind of come and go, and you're not always seeing into the back of the heart of the house as chefs are plating up or cooks are breaking down things. So it's in a way cosmetic, but it's also more in a way function. We just made things function more.
Well, especially the western doors for servers.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot easier than having those
accordion doors.
Accordion doors.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have access,
Right.
easy access to and from when you're carrying trays.
And you need to be able to see either the feet or the head of someone coming in, so there isn't that collision as you go back and forth.
Yeah.
So there's been a good number of changes, but the space is functioning to a level that has never been before. And the more important thing is we're entertaining on a level that no president has done so before. We average 18 to 20 events per semester or greater. And when you think of all the days the Hargises are already on the road doing other things, most of these events happen on a Monday and a Tuesday night. But we do have, from my position as University Club Manager, dinners at the President's House with Ann and Burns Hargis, and we have foundations using the home much more now, whether it be on the lawn for a 10 event or a distinguished alumni breakfast. And it's the house is really a full-time position as a catering manager that I am because of all the different things. And President Hargis's confidence in the house has risen to a level that when he has a dignitary visiting from somewhere else and he has all the options of Ranchers Club or lunch, one of the local businesses, or dinner in Oklahoma City, one of his first thoughts now is, well, let's have him at the house.
Okay. Just talking about staff, now, as we said earlier, there aren't people who are exclusively attached to the house, but what positions do you coordinate with in your work? It sounds like different people at Fizz Plant.
Yes, ma'am. Well, there was the housekeeper, and Pauline Hall was a full-time housekeeper for the President's House, but she also cleaned on campus the President's office and was associated with the Atherton Hotel. But her main area of emphasis was the Willham House, so she is that one dedicated employee. We have a groundskeeper, Kim Ward, who was hired since I was there. I was not part of the hiring process, but she has done an outstanding job as the director of grounds for Willham, and then she works within her own physical plant people of coordinating the grass being cut, hedges being trimmed, edging, blowing, mowing, all those kind of things, and then the changings of the flower beds that happen 3, 4, 5 times a year depending on what needs to be done. And then there's a maintenance man that's assigned to the President's House who does an office there, and he will do other projects on campus, but if we have a call, we get consistently the same person because of I think you and I sidebar this, but you have to have background screenings on these people because they're working around expensive art and they're around the public, and you've got to make sure they look right. And so we have some people that's their direction. That's what they do. So if I got a call from Ms. Hargis now that the wash machine was broken, then I call this one person, and his name's Nate Nichols, and he goes out and he'll work on that repair item, and he has a key for the president's house. There's only a few people on campus that have a key and access to get into the president's house.
Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about events at Willham House. What are some of the annual events that you know of?
We don't really have an annual.
Okay.
And I just had a meeting yesterday with Ms. Hargis and the ladies of the president's office, and we consistently are striving to bring in new guests all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a unique story. Denisha, who works at the OSU football stadium, she's actually, I think, Mike Holder's assistant. It's been here 33 or 38 years. She had never been in the president's house until 2 nights ago when we had an athletic appreciation event. And that touches Ms. Hargis' heart in a big way, because she wants the home to be seen by as many people as possible, to have that chance to interact with them on a personal level. So we don't have a repeat for sure.
Okay.
If I have to pick the closest thing, we have students called President's Partners, formerly President's Posse. They sign up through, I think it's SAB, and they are assigned to work the presidential events with us, and they will come out and be the guides or the door openers or the coat checkers, and what it does is it allows our guests to ask current questions of current students in their positions, because a lot of what we have aren't just students that come to the house. They're board of directors, they're people of all levels, and they want to know, hey, if I'm giving to OSU, what's your feedback on your current quality of education? And that's the primary reason they came to be part of the President's Partners. So.
Okay. What are some memorable special events that you can think of that have been held at Willham House since you've been there?
Memorable to me, or memorable as into the impact of Oklahoma State University? Like, give me the guidance, if you would.
Either way, actually. I mean, things that stood out to you, that either on a personal level made an impression, or that you thought were particularly outstanding.
Well, we hosted Wondatorium.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new area student building, not student, but for the children of Oklahoma State, children of Stillwater, really, not just OSU. And Ms. Hargis is on the board, I think, of Wondatorium. Her and President Hargis serve on many honorary boards, within Stillwater and also still in Oklahoma City and other communities. And at the Wondatorium event, the whole idea is to gain money or gather money to help support the building. And there was a lady there who signed up to sponsor a whole room of toys and things for children. And so you like to be a part of those impactful, life-changing moments. And that's kind of a group that kind of comes to mind.
Okay.
It was also really fun. We had an Easter party at the President's house. And we brought out the Easter Bunny and Pistol Pete and had slides and did an egg hunt. And President Hargis and Ms. Hargis really enjoyed. They created that event to target the neighbors of the Willham House, because they're so busy they don't really see them, but they want to be endearing to the community. So they brought out their kids and their grandkids and their family, and it was a family fun day. It was really good to kind of have that. So I'm sure there's more I can think of, but those are two things that come to mind.
Yeah. Now, in talking about how things are hosted at Willham House, I mean, is there an application process, or is it just interactions between students and the Hargises, or student groups will make a request?
It can be anything. It can be Ms. Hargis touring on Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
Sees a group that has done something that caught her eye. A great example is, I think it's the national meat judging team that we have. They're national champions. And she was at home reading a paper, and the paper said that OSU's agricultural students win 3rd national title in this area or something. And those national titles, although football and basketball and those things are the big things that sell the T-shirts and the hats and the memorabilia, having the overall national titles is huge to our program at OSU. And so just from her reading the paper, she says, Jeremy, would you contact them, look at our calendars and see a date that we can bring them in and say thank you for all that you do. So there isn't a specific route.
Mm-hmm.
Do we field calls to the President's house from groups that want to come and be entertained by the Hargises? Absolutely. sometimes President Hargis can be meeting with someone during the course of a normal meeting like the foundation and say, hey Jeremy, can you make an event happen for 30 people in 2 days? I want to acknowledge, that they're coming over for the great job that they've done hitting this goal, raising money for the foundation. And yes sir, we'll make it happen. So you just have to, it's from all areas. There isn't a specific. What we have done since I've been hired, it seemed to me, and not to generalize, but in my first semester of working, there wasn't necessarily a calendar of events. There was, this person's called the president's office. They'd like to come. President Hargis has agreed. I felt like I was always chasing my tail because not laying myself out for success as events, it was more read and react. So after our first semester, we were able to sit down, have a logistics planning meeting and figure out what groups do we want to have, what dates are available, and bring them in that way. Not that pop-ups don't still occur.
Right. Yeah. But, so you were able to put together more of a game plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just had a meeting yesterday and selected, I think it's 16 groups, and we have 21 possible Monday, Tuesdays that the Hargises are plan on being here. It always changes. Phone calls made, they got to be somewhere. But there's only, of the upcoming semester, only 21 days that we have that we can do things with. So that's part of the challenge, and then being ready for whatever pop-ups occur.
Now we've talked a little bit about some of the things that have been addressed, some of the weak points of the house, some of the things that, what do you think are the best points of the house, the way it is right now?
Well, it's the catch-22. Because it's smaller, it's a more cozier environment. You can have a, I've heard this in event planning, you'd rather have 50 people in a small room than 150 people in a ginormous room and feel like no one's there. So once you hit 25, 30 upstairs, you fill the room. It's a funner party because conversations are flowing. It's easier to play live instrument music upstairs because it fills the room very well. That's a positive to it. And then the same with the basement. When you have 48 guests for dinner and you're elbow to elbow in that space, you can stand up and make a presentation or discuss a wine flight, or President Hargis can address students who are there, and his voice naturally fills the space well. That's one of the more attractive things, I think. And then parking is very well there because you have the lower area and you have the upstairs area. It fits well for the size of who we are and what we do. And I think one of the fun things about my position is I get to meet the level of dignitaries that come to Oklahoma State University. And that's an honor in itself, to meet celebrities and meet people and to know that my job is impacting people who may remember this memory or moment for the rest of their lives. A funny story, side note, we had a young man who came to the president's house. He's now in politics, and I can't remember his official title, but he had came to the house before I was hired, and there's a sliding glass door that's upstairs that goes from the main living room to the outside patio. And in the midst of conversation, he basically did the bird thing and walked right into a glass door. And so it's really funny because here's this man who's now in politics who comes back and he keeps looking over at this door, and he says, "Miss Hargis, you were here. Do you remember a student walking into a door?" She's like, "Yes, I do. It was so funny." And I felt so bad at the same time. He's like, "I was that student." And she was like, "Oh man, we need to put like a Florida Lee sticker on there or something so you see, because when you clean that well, you just can't see it sometimes." And that's that kind of funny moment, that I won't say shaped a life, but it's a funny thing, And so I think for all the talents that I've worked in life, you got to be multifaceted to be able to be the president's event planner, because you've got to meet people and be able to treat them, the delegates or the stars, as if they're people, and not lather all over yourself and get into titty or spill extra coffee or do the things that sometimes people will do when they become starstruck, because people are people, and if you treat them that way, they respect you so much more than if you're shaking like crazy and can't function. So.
Now, besides the bird door story,
Isn't that funny?
any special recollections or any stories about Willham House that you'd like to relate that we haven't talked about?
Such as?
I mean, just any memorable stories or any odd.
I gotta think about that one.
Okay.
I don't know. Any odd things? There's so much.
I was going to say they don't necessarily have to be odd, but I mean this would be kind of like the special events too. Anything that was just particularly memorable, or anything that maybe someone said about the house or expressed about the house that you kind of thought, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Well, it all depends on who you meet,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the challenge in the community. There are people who've lived in this city their whole lives. And when they see the president's house, they see a beautiful home. It looks regal to them from the street. It has that big, floor-to-ceiling glass, and it's 2 stories, and the structure to them looks magnificent. And then there is that level of giver that visits the president's house and thinks, this is really behind the times. You all deserve something better. It's walking that fine line of wanting to be all things to all people. If we demoed the house, there's going to be an outrage to some extent in the Stillwater community. If we don't do it, then it's embarrassing to bring in someone who has $1 billion mansion into it and say, be our guest tonight, and how does this thing work? I'm not used to 61 faucet,
Yeah.
exaggerating slightly, but it's hard, for the Hargises to walk that perfect line. We have so many events, and we've had so much success that we're always growing, we're always changing, and part of this position that is not in job description was reshaping the way catering's done, because there's a certain quality that we're looking for when you're entertaining the guests at the president's house, and we really had to kind of shape OSU celebrations into providing that quality that they weren't providing, because it's embarrassing when you have, as President Hargis said, some of the items that we're serving you could get in the food court. We want to have more unique items than the student or guest wouldn't necessarily find on campus, like a chicken popper. I mean, come on, that's KFC, So challenging them to step up to another quality level to meet the Hargis's expectations and myself has been a real blessing, because once they are achieving that level of success, how much better are they now in the Stillwater community, serving all their other guests at call for catered events. And Ben Coffin's been a great person to work with at celebrations, and he's really created a first class, as we call it, president's menu to make things better.
Okay. Well, are there any things that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to discuss? Anything about room layouts or public-private spaces, or anything about the management of the house that we haven't touched on?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
The people of OSU are really dedicated to doing whatever the president requests, and the people of physical plant, it's kind of hard for them because they're off-site, obviously. And different presidents have had different policies. For instance, there was a president who would not allow any physical plant vehicles to come up the drive unless they had an appointment first. Well, if you think about how much the Hargises travel, how is it possible for the groundskeeping, the maintenance, the electrical people, any one of 20 trucks that could come up the drive on a given day to do things for a property that's 9 acres of serviceable real estate? And so I commend the job that they do, trying to be as politically sensitive as they can be and cater to the request of the president's house, and to make the home what it should be, the pride of Oklahoma State University. And we've done a great job changing the way, in small ways, to make it more attractive, more presentable. And I hear that from a lot of guests that come and say, I visited 5 years ago, or I visited 2 years ago, and this looks nice. This looks so much better. You guys have done a really good job making this flow better, making it more functioning, making it more appealing. And I guess if I have a one last will and testament request, I think it needs a new paint job. I think that, I know we take pride in OSU orange and brown, but I think that a curb appeal class, which we're actually working on now, would do a really justice to the home, and it's time to just kind of give it that painting facelift that may make it pop more from the street.
Mhm.
It's a small thing, but it's something that makes the house look more unique.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. We
Yes,
really
ma'am.
appreciate it and all of your thoughtful answers. So thank you for your help with this.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ms. Larson.